Welcome to Rambam and Def. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam Hilchot Shechita, Perek Yud Alef, Halacha Gimel. The Rambam writes as follows: Kol beheim b'chaya v'oiv b'cheskes bri'in hein. Any non-domestic, domestic animal and fowl are presumed to be healthy. They don't have the invalidation of being a treifa. V'ein cheshes lehen shema yesh behen treifa. We're not concerned whether there might be a treifa amongst them. Therefore, once you shechted a proper shechita, you don't have to examine it, whether there might be one of the many different things that can make the animal treif, some type of injury. They are presumed to be kosher, until something happens, something arises that causes concern. Then, if that happens, you have to examine and check the animal for that particular problem. But otherwise, the animal is considered to be presumed to be kosher. You don't have to check it. That's the halacha over here. The Beit Yosef asked the question, why is it by Chametz, where a person rents a house, Erev Pesach, and the maskir, the renter, is there, that you should ask him whether he did the bedika, even though there's a presumption that the person who's obviously an observant person would do the bedika's chametz. Why don't we rely on the chazak over there? Why do you have to be mavara? Why do you have to verify it? That's the Beit Yosef's question. So the Beit Yosef himself answers the way the Alter Rebbe brings it in Hilchos Pesach, that there's a difference between the two. A behema has a chazaka that it's kosher from the time that it's born, and that chazaka remains until something happens to cast doubts about it. But there's a chazaka from the time it's born. So therefore, once you have that a solid chazaka, you don't have to verify it. But a house has a chazaka that it has chametz in it. So even though there's also a chazaka that it was checked, that they were beidik chametz, but you're talking about to be beidik against the chazaka that the house had chametz in it. Unlike the animal was kosher to begin with. There was never a chazaka that it wasn't kosher. Therefore, when you have the ability to be mavarer, although if you don't have the ability, you can assume that it was done, but if you have the ability to be mavarer, you don't rely on it l'chatchila. That's the Beit Yosef's answer. But there's another question that is asked from Hilchot Tzitzis. And Hilchot Tzitzis, we know that you have to check the tzitzis every day. Even though the tzitzis were kosher yesterday, so why don't we rely on the chazaka that the tzitzis are kosher? So there's a Bach that answers both questions with a different approach. The Bach distinguishes between two kinds of chazaka. There's a chazaka of the animal, that the animal is kosher. That's a natural chazaka. It has nothing to do with human behavior. That's a strong type of chazaka. Conversely, a weaker type of chazaka is a chazaka that you were beidik the chametz, that the person is reliable and he certainly did what he had to do. That kind of chazaka is an inferior chazaka because it's based not on a natural presumption, it's based on a human condition. And therefore, since it happens sometimes that a person could forget, so that chazaka is a weaker chazaka, and therefore you have to be mavara. You could rely on it, but in other words, if you can't be mavara, but the chatchila you should be mavara. And that answers the question from both chametz and from tzitzis, because in the case of chametz, you're relying on the presumption that the person did the bedika. That's a human effort. And the same thing with tzitzis. You're relying that the tzitzis that the person made yesterday and the person checked yesterday is still the way it, and nothing else happened to it. But the Beit Yosef's answer, that he distinguishes between the behema, where it was always had a chazaka, it never had an opposite chazaka, that it wasn't kosher. Masha'enken chametz, the house has a chazaka that it had chametz in it. How do you apply that to tzitzis? You can't apply that to tzitzis. So the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Tzitzis gives a different explanation by tzitzis. And the Alter Rebbe explains that yes, every day, if you talk about today, you could say, yes, there's a chazaka that the tzitzis are kosher, because yesterday they were kosher. So when do you have to ever check the tzitzis? According to that, you would never have to check the tzitzis. So there'd be never any bedika. And to say that there's never a chance that the tzitzis could be ripped, people could step on it and other things could happen, So you're dealing with a situation that if you rely on the chazaka for one day, you'd have to rely on the chazaka forever, and that's untenable because the chazaka is not one that is so solid that you could say it will never happen. True, maybe today it won't happen. The likelihood of it happening is small, but to say it will never happen, and therefore you have to be Vedic every day. And that answers the question from Tzitzis, and the answer from Chametz is the way the Beit Yosef explained it, that by Chametz there's another chazaka, there's a cheskas Chametz, and therefore you have to be Mavar.